On this show, we tend to concern ourselves with the little things, which of course means we usually completely neglect the big things. We should probably neglect the little things, too.
Hey everyone, we have a very special guest this week. She is the author of the upcoming book Seinfeldia, How a Show About Nothing Changed Everything, Jennifer Armstrong. Welcome to Seincast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Seinfeldia, that's a great term. We have Seincast, there's Seinology, but Seinfeldia, what is Seinfeldia?
Isn't it wonderful? It's so wonderful that his name ends up lending itself to so many different speech parts. It's really helpful for those of us who are kind of in the Seinfeld business. So Seinfeldia is a term I had actually also played with Seinfeld Land, but we thought Seinfeldia sounded like cool and hip, like Portlandia. But the idea is that there's a special kind of realm of existence, essentially, that is between the fiction of Seinfeld, the show, and reality. And it kind of never dies. Like, they created this place where reality and fiction interact when they created the show and the way they did it based on a lot of real things in the real world. And what's funny about it is that because of the incredible enduring fandom of the show, it kind of never dies. Like, there are some big characters in Seinfeldia, like the guy who played the soup Nazi, Larry Thomas, who's a wonderful man, and he has kind of made his living continuing to play the soup Nazi since the show went off the air. This was one episode, and this man has made his career of saying "no soup for you" for 20 years because people love it so much. So I kind of see it as this place where it's like he's a big part of it. The real Kramer, who, if people don't know, Kramer was based on a real guy named Kenny Kramer, who lived in the apartment building that Larry David was living in when he was creating the show. And this guy, Kenny Kramer, still gives bus tours of real sites from Seinfeld in New York. And this is, this supports him. So it has its own economy. It has its own sort of prominent citizens. And it's a place that you can sort of visit at any time. And I think that is part of why the fandom endures at such a high level, at such intensity. Like, you can go visit these places and feel like you're still a part of it.
Can you give us kind of like a brief overview of what this book is to you and what your mission was when you decided to write it?
Absolutely. It's really a history of the whole show. And my idea was, there's so much out there about Seinfeld already that, the basic stuff if you're interested, you kind of know. You know who Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld are. They created the show. I wanted to tell the entire history of the show, which to me meant starting at the very beginning when they conceived it and taking it all the way to now when it is still such a huge phenomenon. It almost feels like it never went off the air in a lot of ways if you look at the internet and things like that and the way the fandom acts and the way it's still on TBS and they still advertise it and now Hulu, it feels like this continuous history to me. And I was kind of fascinated too by this idea that there are these two guys who at the time were not super famous. They were working comedians, and they can sort of come up with this idea, which, was famously about nothing. We can debate that later, but people love to debate that point. But they are the ones who originally said it, and that it was this incredibly basic concept for a show that they conceived in a coffee shop after doing stand-up because NBC had expressed interest in doing a show with Jerry. And they were like, I don't know, what if it's just like us? It's like what we do. It's like two guys talking. And that turns into this whole world that continues to this day. I think that's really fascinating in the way it I saw it as this sort of concentric circles of like, then first they just hire people to work on the show, which is pretty normal. It starts to expand outward and outward and outward until it is the biggest show in America at the time. And I would say arguably the biggest, we're probably never going to see a show as big as this again because of the way TV has changed, and continues, to have its sort of tentacles into the current day, and people are just as excited about it now as they were then. I think it's really fascinating that you can have that these two guys just talking in a coffee shop can end up having this far-reaching impact in a way that they don't even need to participate anymore. Like they have all their millions, they're done, but people keep their vision living on, and I think that's kind of cool.
Especially when it comes to two knuckleheads talking about Seinfeld every week on a podcast. It just,
exactly. That's what's. The more I looked into this world, the more I was just fascinated by almost anyone who's done anything sign related. It almost always kind of takes over their lives and is bigger than they expected. Like everyone thinks they are the biggest Seinfeld fan. And then once you start looking around, you find out that it'd be really hard to be the biggest Seinfeld fan, because so many people are like secretly thinking they're the biggest Seinfeld fan.
Oh yeah, we've learned that ourselves from hosting this podcast and just being in touch with fans. To I do a lot of Seinfeld trivia on the side, and everyone that walks in there to play for the first time thinks I am the biggest Seinfeld fan. Yeah. No one knows more than me, and then they're like, "Oh my God, why should I have to know the name of this random girlfriend in an episode?" As I get older, and with the internet, I just realized like, oh my God, there are just so many Seinfeld fans out there, and it's just as normal to be obsessed with Seinfeld as it is to be obsessed with football, or to be obsessed with anything out there.
Yeah, I think that the thing we're talking about here too is so interesting because I think it really mirrors in general the evolution of fandom overall, like the way fandom has changed and works now. Exactly what you just said. And I think that the rise of the internet at exactly the end of Seinfeld really allowed for this kind of fandom to continue and blossom online. And it is the kind of show, it just happened to have a lot of things. I don't think they sat down and did this, but like it happened to have a lot of things that allowed for this. It doesn't have a mythology the way that a lot of fan stoking shows like Game of Thrones or movies like Star Wars has, but it has something like it, right? It has these lines that people want to repeat over and over again to each other. They have almost like a call and response a lot of the time. People know that it's almost like having a secret password. Like if you can say to somebody something about a puffy shirt or even just like a hello Newman or something like that, if they know what you're talking about, you're like, oh, you're one of my people, and that's something that I think has really ended up making this a very cohesive group, because like you said, I think a lot of people felt that way about it when it was first on, and we all thought we were just watching by ourselves. And then it turned out there were a bunch of other people with weird senses of humor, way more than they expected, even at NBC, of course, really, really got this. And, the more they repeat it, I think the fans know the show way better, for instance, than the people who made the show.
Oh, at this point, absolutely. And that's a really interesting feeling as a Seinfeld fan, because what I'm coming to realize with this podcast, and I'm sure you felt the same way with the book, is that there's no end to the Seinfeld fandom or celebration. Like there's no trivia contest you can win. There's no podcast you can do that will cover everything and kind of put an end to the discussion. It's just going to go on for, well, who knows how long.
It's exactly, it's part of the both the problem and what actually became the concept of my book was, I actually just set out like a normal person to, well, I don't know if that's the right word. But I set out to do this very similarly. I had a book about the Mary Tyler Moore Show before this. And, the idea was, let's write a book about this history of Seinfeld. It's the most, it's probably the most influential show of all time, or it's up there. And it's different. It's not the same as saying like, okay, Mary Tyler Moore Show helped the women's movement, and now sometimes you can watch it at late at night on, in reruns the end. like this just goes on, and that's what's special about it.
Was Seinfeld more daunting than that?
It definitely was because of what we've been talking about to a large extent. I do not even pretend to be the biggest Seinfeld fan, in the sense that I know, like, I'm going down in like a trivia off with somebody or something. Like, that's not, I am not the absolute minutia expert in Seinfeld. So that part scares me, because anything you do like this, I've written about television for, a while now, for 15 years now or something. And some things, like, okay, fine, whatever. But certain shows you write about, I wrote about Game of Thrones when I was at Entertainment Weekly for a little bit, for instance. And like, it's terrifying, because there's definitely people who have made it their business to like know all this stuff. And they're going to just, if you get anything wrong or leave something out, they're going to be like, what about this? That part is scary, that's the part that I want people to like it. I want to get things right, of course. But I did not write a book simply to get in arguments with other fans. That was not my plan. So that part is pretty daunting.
But, I'll say as one of those nuts, as one of those people that just like want to absorb all the Seinfeld knowledge and want to know everything and all that, your book was such a breeze. And the story you took me on, I thought was fascinating, because it wasn't just this paint by numbers. All right, well, 1989, then 1990, like, which is something I would have done. Mine would have read like a VCR manual, just like really, really dull. But you were able to just bounce around from the show production to, Seinfeldia, to what was going on in certain writers' heads. And it's just fascinating. I think that Seinfeld fans, the hardcore, trivia gurus, or someone's mom or dad, that loves to watch the show every evening on reruns, is going to really dig this book.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to hear that. And I'm pretty sure I have a few little scoops in there. So,
oh yeah, I don't want to spoil any of them. I wrote a few down, but one of the most amazing parts of your book is you got to talk to some pretty incredible people, very influential people. Just to name a few, you got to speak to Tom Sharonis, Carol Leifer, David Mendel, Alec Berg, Jeff Schaefer. What was it like?
It's funny, because I've always been more excited to talk to producer and writer types than famous people. So it's never, whenever people at cocktail parties are like, who's the coolest person you've gotten to interview? They want to hear like Tom Hanks or something. And instead I'm like, Peter Melman. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm more excited by. I guess it makes sense. I'm a writer, but I've always loved talking to the people who actually create these things. So it was exciting, and it was fun, and they were helpful. And, this is true of any book I've done, that you get the one right person who understands what you're trying to do, and they help you get in touch with others. And that helps a lot. When David Mendel calls somebody and says, hey, can you talk to this woman? It's a lot better than me just coming at them out of nowhere. So I was very lucky. And the funny thing about the writers on this show, too, is, there are some big names, and they really have been interviewed before. But a lot of them said, like, people haven't really asked us this much before about the show, because it's so easy to just go to the famous people. And the famous people have told their stories over and over, whereas the writers were the ones coming up with this stuff all the time. And a big part of this, I think we all know this, but it made it really fun to talk to them, what is the fact that so much of the storylines come from their own lives. And this was something that Larry David was really into. And kind of, they all talked about how by the end of your tenure on the show, you'd be just like desperate. Like, you're looking everywhere in your life for stories, because the problem is that most of your life is spent writing for the show. So like, nothing's happening to you because you're just at the studio all the time. So you're like, anything, you go to buy a stick of gum and you're like, where's the story? Is there something here? Can something happen to me? And they were just like hitting, just go anywhere for story ideas. But so many of them had wonderful little anecdotes about how they came up with, and I personally never get tired of those. I could, I'll listen to any of them, because it's always a little different. They always made it a little funnier for the show. But even things like the Soup Nazi, we know, are real people, and that's what's fun about it.
You mentioned in the book how some writers would go to New York for like a week and rent a hotel, I think. as just to get out of LA, get back into that New York mindset for ideas.
I loved that. So one thing, I want to mention just that before that, I think it was Peter Melman. I can't remember which one of them. One of them told me that they felt like, at least in the early days of the show, they were all New York transplants who were then living in LA writing for the show. And they said that Seinfeld was a show in the 90s about people's lives in New York in the 60s and 70s and 80s, because that's, they were pulling from their past life. For story ideas. And then especially as it went on, it's like I said, they're kind of to the point where they're like, oh my God, we just need anything. And we're not in New York anymore. And there's so many of these episodes we're doing about cars, and nobody has cars in New York. So we got to get like real New York stories. And yeah, toward the end, especially, that the show would actually put them up. The show sent them over the summer for a little jaunt to New York for like a week, where they would just be in the hotel, and then their job was to go out with their notebooks and experience things.
As a Seinfeld fan, I'm like, oh, I'm so envious. I'd love to do that. Man, that would be so much fun. But then when you read, especially after Larry David left the show, how hard these writers had to work, to fill that vacancy. These writers rather, just worked so hard to churn out these episodes without Larry David in those later seasons. I find myself even criticizing seasons 8 and 9 for not being as good as the earlier stuff, because Larry David's not around. But from some of those people I mentioned, like David Mendel and Alec Berg and Jeff Schaffer, I mean, it's incredible what they did.
And some of the great episodes really are later. People, I think we have these certain ideas about how the show worked, because it's like in the moment it felt that way. It was a very big deal, especially by those later seasons. It was getting a lot of press coverage. This is another thing that was kind of new-ish about the show, was that it was in the era when we first started treating pop culture really seriously. It's hard. I'm sure people who are young now, it's impossible for them to even fathom. But there was a time when TV was just TV, and you would just watch it or not. It was like people wouldn't get mad at you at cocktail parties for not watching Breaking Bad or whatever. Like it was just, you'd miss an episode, whatever. Like you couldn't record it. Okay, who cares? TV was not taken seriously. It was not a big deal. And then right toward the end of Seinfeld was when we started to really take our TV seriously a little more. Before the golden age, I know, but before Sopranos. But,
I'm wondering, when is like the next era after Seinfeld? Is it Sopranos, like late 90s?
Yeah, I think so. And I think one leads directly to the other so seamlessly, even if it didn't feel that way at the time, both because of the taking of things seriously and the anti-heroes. I sort of subscribe to the theory that in some ways Seinfeld paved the way for Sopranos, which feels weird, but it's TV that aspired to be more than just TV is the first part. I mean, I think Larry David wanted to make a really smart, semi-literary show. I shouldn't even say semi. I think he was making a literary show, and it was just different kind of literary from The Sopranos. But this was a time when media was starting to really take pop culture seriously. I think Entertainment Weekly launched in something like 1991, and that's a real benchmark for people want to read serious coverage, not just like stupid fluff and not just celebrity profiles, but real coverage of their culture. And Seinfeld was part of this. And by the end of this show, man, those last couple seasons, the New York papers are running polls every week, asking people if they think, Seinfeld's better or worse than it was before. Like, that's a lot of pressure for these people that, they weren't used to that the way that they are kind of now with recaps and things. They weren't used to being sort of judged week by week. And are they still as good as they were when Larry David was there? No, they're not. No one thinks so, blah, blah, blah. But yes, if you watch those last couple seasons, they're not all perfect, but neither are the first couple seasons. So
absolutely. I mean, the older I get, the more I realize how stupid it is really to be like, well, this season's better than this, and this episode. I mean, it's really just depending on what kind of mood you're in, and really absorbing the series as a whole. Because I think when you're going week by week, at least I remember this when I watched, believe it or not, I only watched one episode live, and that was season 9.
Okay.
before then I wasn't really like a huge Seinfeld fan, but I remember watching those episodes and kind of feeling weird, the first time I'd watch them, like, oh, that doesn't really feel right. And then, I'd of course tape it, and the more I rewatched it, the more I loved it. It almost like had to settle in a little bit.
That is interesting, and it shows why probably it endures so much, that I think it holds up almost better. I like rewatching. I mean, I'm sure this is opening up a can of worms here, but like rewatching something like the finale for me, out of context, it's so much more brilliant than it felt at the time when we all had ideas about what it was supposed to be and all the hype was there. It is different.
I mean, spoilers for my feelings on the finale. I'm actually one of the few defenders of it.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the finale. I mean, and like I said, the problem is partly if you watch it now, I don't see, like, it's brilliant if you watch it now.
And, well, I mean, listen, everyone will say, well, even I think Peter Melman and a few other writers said in the book, like, how are you going to match the expectations? And we've all been there from movies and TV shows over the years. How are they going to wrap things up and satisfy everyone? It's impossible. But I think if you just write down, like what Larry David, I think, wanted to accomplish, really simply with the finale, I think it achieved all of those things, from celebrating actors and actresses who appeared on the show before to, where can they stick the group for a year, not have to worry about them.
I mean, there are things we could quibble about, but like the overall idea is really ambitious and cool. And it wasn't just, let's just do some dumb episode of TV and make it cheesy, like a Friends finale or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I loved. And it has this, like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the characters they brought back, all of that stuff. And it at least tried to do something. That's my feeling on that.
You're not watching the show to see how it ends. You're watching the show for, each individual episode.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, short of Jerry and Elaine suddenly becoming completely different people and like getting together or something, there were not a lot of options.
Mm-hmm. Well, getting back to the book and, all of the people you spoke to, was there one conversation that stood out from the rest? I
mean, I had particularly fantastic interviews with Peter Melman, with Dave Mandel. He was incredible. Like, he just told me everything and had so many good stories. I feel like I believe Spike Ferriston gave me one of my big scoops. Mm-hmm. I said something I totally casually, I swear to God, like it just was a normal question. I was going through certain episodes that I loved, and I loved the Elaine dancing episode. And I was like, so, I'm asking people the inspirations behind some of my favorite episodes. So what was the deal with the Elaine dancing? Was that from something specific from your life? And he goes, what do you know? And I was like, wow, this was so not what I expected. Like, I was really just saying that casually. Like, I was like, I don't know anything, I swear to you. And he was like, all right, I think it's time this came out. And I was like trying to like remain cool. I was like, all right. I mean, if you feel good about it.
Whatever.
And then it was a better answer than I could have expected. I thought it was just going to be like, oh, I had this girlfriend who danced weird or whatever. But if you'd like to tell your listeners, it is someone famous, and I'm pretty proud of that one. And I was like searching the internet to see if it was out there anywhere.
And it's not.
It's not, which means that it's not out there because, as we know, Seinfeld fans are obsessive. It would be on the Wikipedia page if it were out there. So that was exciting. I love, that was a great revelation from one of the writers. I love talking to Tom Sharonis just because he was there from almost the beginning, but he lives in LA, and it's so weird. He has these these children's books that he's written.
Go figure.
Not what you would expect. And my favorite thing about him was that, and this is in the book, that he kept saying, like, his experience at the beginning of the show is like, he's like, I have no idea what the fuck this show is. Like, I don't understand it at all, but fine. Like, he'd be like, all right, I'm just going to do what they say. I don't get it. And he just went with it. And I love that about him, actually. I think, so many other people in positions with the early production of the show were so busy trying to wait, should we fix this? Because no one understands it. Does this need a better plot, at the network? And he was like, what the fuck ever. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to trust them. And it worked.
Yeah, I feel like Tom Sharonis doesn't get as much attention, mainly because, he stepped away from directing, and,
Right.
Andy Ackerman is just one of the biggest TV directors out there.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And he came at the height of the show.
Absolutely. And you could, the money shows, on screen, like they were able to do versus, I think what Tom Sharonis was pretty limited in those early days.
Yeah. And he did kind of establish a lot of the look for the show that they had to keep. And they would have wanted to. That one of his big things was just, I want to light this thing like it's a movie instead of, a multi-camera TV show. They really wanted it to be single camera and filmic from the beginning, but that wasn't in at the time, and the network wouldn't allow it. So he really allowed them to kind of establish this aesthetic that let them be as close to that as possible. They, as we all know, they ended up doing more and more location shooting and things like that as the show went on. And like you said, as the budgets went up, so that you barely remember that there was a studio audience there. But he was really instrumental in stuff like that.
Yeah, Seinfeld to me never felt like a sitcom. It just didn't seem like the kind of show where, characters enter from the left and they walk to the right, and the whole house or the apartment is just spread out across this huge stage. Mm-hmm. And it's not just an issue of set design, but you mentioned audience laughter. Like, sometimes I never notice people laughing.
Yeah.
And I know Larry David kind of had issues, with audience interruption, delaying things and whatnot. But yeah, that's just something I wanted to throw out there. Like, I hold Seinfeld above all other sitcoms for a lot of reasons. Mainly because it just doesn't feel like one of your typical live studio audience sitcoms.
Exactly. That's why I was like, think of how it's one of my favorite things to think about when I write about pop culture of the past, but it's also, it's so hard to conceptualize for a lot of us. Like, think of how mind-blowing that was at that time. Now we just watch it and we're like, oh, it's Seinfeld. But at that time, no one did stuff like that. No one did jokes like this. No one shot this way. That's why people's heads exploded when it really started to take off, because they were like, what is this? Why is it amazing? Why we didn't know sitcoms could do this.
Which is so funny, because you look at the pop culture influence of a show like Seinfeld, and then you look at something like the Emmys, like, Frasier always beating Seinfeld after its fourth season. It always blows my mind that Seinfeld only won one Emmy for best comedy series. And
that's bizarre to me.
Yeah, and it's just so amazing how Seinfeld was treated by award ceremonies and whatnot just pales in comparison to its pop culture influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I would also say, at least it's easy for me to say now at this point, but it's like that just adds to its allure, because it gets to be this like cool outsider instead, right? Like, who's like Frasier or whatever. Like, there's a lot of sort of weird animosity between Friends and Seinfeld too.
I'm actually one of those people. I've never seen Friends before, and I pride myself in it.
Yeah, a lot of people are like this, and I actually was saying, I want to write something about are you a Friends person or a Seinfeld person? Do you like one of those weird quizzes from BuzzFeed? Because it kind of is true, even though I will out myself now and say that I am currently binging Friends on Netflix, partly just because I never watched it in order, and partly because I was like, that would be cool to because this was on at the same time. It's just the whole era.
Am I missing out? Am I missing out? Do I need to watch the show?
It's good. It's a good, solid comedy show. You know what I mean? And they're pretty and they're funny and it's great. It's definitely different though. It's obsessed with character and soap operatics and liking characters. Like, your whole thing there is that you like these people and you care what happens to them. Whereas Seinfeld was like, we're not going to use that crutch.
Sure.
We're not going to use that whole likability thing.
Love it.
Right? They're terrible people who just happen to be incredibly funny to watch. And I feel like so much of what they did was all just how can we make our lives as hard as possible? They wanted to do the most badass comedy thing they could do. They wanted it to be the most challenging, which feels very Larry David to me. Mm-hmm. That includes being sort of snubbed continuously by the establishment at the Emmys.
Mm-hmm. The thing with Seinfeld and Friends, and I'll leave it alone here, is I think it's so hard to talk about TV, especially TV in the 90s, without, bringing up Seinfeld and Friends. I mean,
Yep.
I think Jason Alexander at one point, points out how, people say Friends is like a carbon copy of Seinfeld. Well, Seinfeld kind of came after Cheers. There's always a passing of the torch, so to speak.
Yeah.
Between these shows. And I feel like I'm missing out on something with Friends by not watching it. Just understanding NBC comedy.
Yeah,
as a
that's
whole.
what I like about it. It's interesting to see that these were the two biggest shows in the nation at that time. This was such a big deal. Everybody would stay home on Thursday night and watch these shows. And Friends is really a solid show. That's the thing about it, is I get into the Seinfeldian kind of dissing of Friends. I just do it without thinking, but I do think it's a really solid show. It's just not as creative and groundbreaking. It's about pretty people being in and out of love with each other and being pretty funny along the way, whereas Seinfeld is this whole different thing. And that's why I always thought it was so funny that the Seinfeld people were so worried that Friends was, ripping them off or whatever. It's I guess in the sense that it's people in New York, but beyond that, it's not really it's single people in New York. But beyond that, it's so different. It's crazy. So.
I don't follow sports at all, but it's sort of my team's better than your team sort of mentality. So.
It's exactly it. And the Friends people had plenty of, the actual people who made Friends had plenty of sort of jealousy of Seinfeld too, and how much attention they got. And they complained all the time about how Seinfeld got to, have a whole masturbation episode when Friends wasn't even allowed to have a condom. And there was definitely super sibling rivalry. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Going back to just, your book and just some of the incredible bits of trivia that I picked along the way, I was underlining all these passages. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I didn't know the main reason why so many writers left between seasons is Larry David kind of wanted a new batch each year.
Yeah. It goes to that whole thing we were talking about where they had to mind their own lives. I think that he saw the limited lifespan that allowed for, and especially when he was still there, and especially at the beginning, I think the writers were actually mostly there to sort of strip mine their lives and then move on. Mm-hmm. That was really what was going on there. Yeah, most of them, there was a lot of turnover in those early years.
I've even heard stories that I don't think I've made the podcast before from writers on the show, how it wasn't this, kumbaya, everyone gets along kind of easy process to write on this show. There's got to be a lot of, I don't know if nepotism is the right word, but, from a lot of people coming from Harvard. Mm-hmm. And, I know early on there were some writers who weren't necessarily the types of writers they were looking for, meaning they're sitcom writers, and I know sitcom writers didn't really have a place on Seinfeld.
No, not at all. That's what it was strictly share your own lives, move on. And yeah, I think they were pretty open about this with me, that it was extremely difficult. Some of my favorite chapters are the ones that are kind of inside the writers' rooms, early on and then later, both times. Super interesting because, part of it was their system too. They were different from other sitcoms in that they didn't have a writers' room per se. Most sitcoms, especially at that time, they'd all go into a room and brainstorm together, and then one person would come out with the assignment, but it was basically the stories were broken as a group. This was kind of every man for himself, and I say man because that's mostly true.
Yeah.
Mostly white men on the show. I think we all know that. And you had to find Jerry and Larry and then pitch a story to them. And then you had to get all 4 characters' stories approved before you could start writing a script that would be yours. So you can imagine how stressful this is. First of all, you have to find them. They're busy. Second of all, they have to pay attention to you. Third of all, they have to say yes. And then you have to get 4 of these before you can write a script. So if you're friends with them, it's a little easier than if you're not sort of in the in crowd and you don't know them as well, or you're not super aggressive. So one of my favorite sort of little storylines in the book is that I talked to this guy, Fred Stoller, who actually wrote a Kindle single about his experience on the show called My Seinfeld Year. And he really had a hard time because he's not a very aggressive guy. He's actually a very successful character actor, but he was trying writing, and he just didn't have that, gumption there, the confidence to go up to them and pitch story ideas and get them. So he ended up doing maybe like 2 episodes, I think, during his time there, and then he was done. But he tells these stories to me about like wandering around the lot instead of writing because he didn't know what to do. He'd go across the street and like play pinball and get a taco. He went and saw a movie once and used his writer's discount to go see a movie instead. He made friends with all these people on like the Roseanne set and this set and that set because he was a character actor. He loved talking to other actors. He just he was not meant to be a writer on the show. So he had a lot of trouble, and Larry David, I think, sensing his insecurity, gave him a hard time. And he did not quite have the will to stand up to him, even though there were some nice exchanges he told me about too, where Larry would be like, listen, you have to like get in there and do your thing. He was sort of like encouraging him while also giving him a hard time. So it sounds like it was very difficult.
I pick up on that as I get older from Larry and Jerry, how they seem to be, they're not bullies, but they are they're intimidating, and they're very intelligent. They're very powerful. And I don't care if you're Fred Stoller or if you're Peter Mellman or one of these, Harvard writers, like it's going to be pretty tough, I think, making your way through that.
Exactly. And I mean, I think these other guys, the only difference is that they were like, okay, whatever, I'm telling you this now, like they just sort of like plowed through that and ignored when being given a hard time or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they earned the respect, whereas he didn't have the same kind of personality. And so it just didn't quite work out. And then in the later seasons, it was hard too, not because they were working so hard and there were sort of little factions developing among the writers. So it was a hard job. I think it was really stressful.
Jennifer, I'm so happy we got to talk about the book. We barely scraped the surface here. There is so much going on in this book that, I could keep you here all day talking about it. But I want to move on from Seinfeldia and nerd out with you just for a little bit. Talk to you about your Seinfeld fandom. I know you said you're not like a, huge trivia guru, but you are a fan nonetheless, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I write about television for a living. There's no getting around Seinfeld in TV history. You know what I mean? Like, this is it. This is, I don't know. I can actually tell when I'm pondering a new book how big this is, because it's like, I don't think you'd get better than this in terms of like something that had influence and is big and important in TV history. And I absolutely watched it every week when it was first on. I watched it in reruns whenever, you know what I mean? Like, just, okay, yes, I'm in the mood for a Seinfeld rerun. So it's just part, to me, it's just part of life. You're just like, of course, Seinfeld, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm never, anything I've ever been a fan of, I'm not the kind of fan that like gets into memorizing trivia and that sort of thing. I just like something and I like to talk about it. I'm more interested in, like, I'm better at saying like, oh, this episode was written by this person or whatever, instead of knowing every single line of every single episode, for instance.
Well, you get kind of sick of that. I love Seinfeld. I could quote it forever, but sometimes I want something else, I'm like, I don't want to have the same meal over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. And there's more to it than just that. Like I'm interested and inspired by what it wanted to do and how it achieved it. Like, it really is one of our first literary mainstream television shows, and certainly sitcoms. And it knows how to tell stories, and the characters are incredible, and that's why it's so good, is because of those characters that they created. And I think that's what I always loved about it, even when I was watching in, high school and college mostly. It was just like Elaine. Elaine is the goddess of all probably women who watched Seinfeld. What a great role model to grow up with in her own way.
She's really a progressive, female character, I think.
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, to me, if I could have, I just would have written my entire book about Elaine. Like, mm-hmm. First of all, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the shit, we all know that. And she's proven it now. I feel like she was like on a mission, like, no, I'm going to prove that I'm the greatest of all of the Seinfeld people. And I think they would all be like, yeah, you are. It's true. She's amazing. And their character is just incredible. And it's actually so different from her as a person that it's even more amazing. And one of the favorite things that I learned about her from doing this book is when I asked, like I mentioned, it was mostly guys who wrote for the show. And so I asked a lot of them about writing for her. And they said that they really didn't make distinctions among storylines. Like, they'd kind of just come up with ideas from their own lives, and then they'd figure out which character they could most likely give that to. And what that means is that a lot of guys' experiences in life ended up being transferred to Elaine as a character. And most of them claimed, and I believe them having watched it, that they did not think to themselves, now I am going to write the woman character. Mm-hmm. They just wrote a character. And I think that's what made her so progressive, is that they didn't treat her differently. And in this really weird way, they end up with this super feminist character from an all-male staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this weird sort of thing where it's like, okay, I'm a male writer. I've got to think like a female in order to make this like accurate or relatable. Never felt that way with Seinfeld.
Right. That's what's so cool about her. And I mean, they did end up eventually, like, she is actually the one who has any politics, really, I would say. She's the only character that ever really expressed political views, and she was extremely progressive. She one of my favorite episodes is when she has to break up with the hot guy because he is pro-life. And like, she has this great line, I'm not going to do it right, but it's something to the effect of, but he's so attractive. And she won't order the pizza from the place because she finds out, and this I thought was very progressive for the time. I feel like we hear this kind of story all the time now, but not as much in the 90s. She hears that her favorite pizza place has donated a bunch of money to pro-life groups, and so she can't order pizza from them anymore. So she's the one who actually, and she might even possibly say the word feminism. I need to look into that. But it was a very different time, and you didn't just see this stuff happening on TV. She got to participate in the masturbation contest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they did like, she had to, put up more money, but she had odds, but still she lost, which was amazing.
Oh yeah. I mean, also going to like birth control and going to orgasms. It's so amazing how natural they make it. No one's ever treated differently just because of their gender, with the exception maybe of the masturbation contest, her having to pony up more money. But
but that was like I will even stipulate as a feminist that's like a funny joke, like that's how guys would act. And it's the coolest thing about that is they negated it by having her lose. That really, and like the John F. Kennedy Jr. stuff is hilarious in that episode. The sponge, the Today Sponge episode is a huge, huge moment for her. She gave us one of the great phrases, sponge worthy. And that is so progressive if you think about it at that time, like that we'd have a catchphrase that could then refer to that and she was 0% apologetic about it. It wasn't like this thing, like, oh, she's this huge whore. She just wanted to have sex and she needed all the sponges, and this is what it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It was, and yeah, you mentioned there's the episode where that's about whether Jerry can give her an orgasm. Like, there's a lot of great stuff in there for her, and I love that they were so. I don't know what it's such a surprise from them in a lot of ways. You think like all these guys together, couldn't possibly handle this female character, and they just decided to go at it from the other angle, which was like, oh, we're just not going to treat her differently, and that completely worked.
Absolutely. Well, I had a question for you here, pretty general, but who's your favorite of the main four? It sounds like Elaine, right?
It probably is Elaine. I mean, it's so hard to pick, right? Like, they're all so amazing, but I think especially in terms of like, that was for me the one entry point of the show. Like, if there was anything actually relatable from real life about the show, it was that I was like, I want to be like Elaine. Which is kind of cool. Like, I felt like she had dark hair and dark eyes, so I felt like she kind of looked like me. And so I really and I had all the Elaine clothes back in the 90s, the flowy dresses and the big hair and all of that. So I really, she in a lot of ways, I actually think she's the most grounded character. in addition to being a woman.
Well, it always blows my mind when I kind of defend Elaine in these moments when the characters of the main four do something really despicable or selfish. I always find a way to defend Elaine, and I wonder if I'm being biased in some way, because a lot of people will point out she's just as selfish as any of them.
Oh, she definitely is. Though, I do think I feel like she's the most human, and one of my favorite episodes even is the late breaking Bizarro episode. Simply because there's something really interesting going on with Elaine right toward the end of the show. I don't know if they did it on purpose, but where first she tries out the other friends. Like, she gets it, right? She gets, this is terrible that I hang out with these people all the time. My life is going nowhere. So she tries this other thing that doesn't work. And then, in that last episode, you kind of get that feeling when she's in that jail cell. I might be reading too much into it, but you kind of get this feeling that she's just like, oh, for Christ's sake, what did I do? Why didn't I just get away from these idiots when I could? She knows. I firmly believe that. The rest don't know or care. She's like, oh, no, I made terrible choices in life.
There's a real interesting evolution of the Elaine character. Early on, she's very sweet, hardworking, really puts up with a lot of crap. Definitely the most professional of the three. I mean, she's the only one who, she does have 3 jobs over the series, but, for long... They're jobs that last longer than a season or two. You know what I mean?
And they make sense together. This is what I'm saying. She's a real character.
Absolutely.
She has a life.
But she definitely has some progressive issues. She takes a political stance. She's a big environmentalist.
Yep, that's right.
But later on, especially around the time Larry left, when that hairdo changes and she wears a little bit more black, I notice she gets a little more cynical. And I think that's because, as you pointed out, she's wanting to leave this group. It's like the group is like a virus, and it's taken over.
Yes.
And it really affects her character in a lot of ways. She makes fun of other people more. She seems to shout more, get angry. Before she seemed to be a little bit more kind of reserved, or at least just sweeter about things, maybe not as honest with people as she'd like to be.
Yeah, I think she really, she's the only one that I can imagine, writing fan fiction about her life after the show, right? I have this whole trajectory in my head for her, where the rest I'm just no, you just continue to be a loser or whatever. George did not get it together and have some great life. Whereas, I could see her really getting out and, marrying somebody equally funny and witty and cynical and having a great life and a great job. Her and Susan, I'm kind of obsessed with, I guess, because they're the girls. I don't know, but Susan fascinates me because, I feel like there could be a tragic show written about Susan, off screen, until her untimely death.
Over the past couple of years, I have felt so bad for Heidi Swedberg.
That poor woman.
Yeah, just listen, I stepped away from acting. I'm a ukulele instructor now.
To play her ukulele.
Yeah, it's just leave me alone. And then it's boom, Jason Alexander says she was a nightmare to work with, and I'm like, oh no. Yeah, but I'm actually a big fan of Susan as well. Well, getting into maybe more episodes, do you have a favorite episode, your go-to, or is this one of these things where it just depends on what kind of mood you're in?
I mean, there's so many, but the one that I usually cite, and I have no, this is so weird because I have no reason why. Well, I've one reason. I love The Sea Was Angry That Day, my friends.
The marine biologist, yeah.
And it's I call it The Sea Was Angry That Day.
I'm sorry.
Simply because that's basically why I love that episode. It's purely based on that monologue at the end of that episode. If I were an actor, I feel like that's the monologue I would do for my auditions. It's everything about the show, right? It's so great. It brings everything together in this totally surprising way. I feel like for some reason that, I was young when I was youngish when I was watching it originally. And for some reason, I feel like I remember getting it around this time. I had been kind of just passively watching, and I watched that episode and I went I see what they're doing. I see how they bring it all together. That's really interesting. That's what's funny about it. And it shows how this was the beginnings of my mind, of the TV writer mind versus just watching television like a normal person. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then rewatching it now, I could watch him do that speech every day for the rest of my life and be happy. He really, it shows how Jason Alexander brings that dramatic skill he has to being so funny.
Yeah.
I really love it.
This is kind of a tough question, but we're going to take another step back from favorite episode. But do you have a favorite season, or as we put it, era of Seinfeld? And I can explain that a little bit.
Sure.
Like, Seinfeld to us comes in 3 parts. There's seasons like 1, 2, and 3 when it's flying under the radar in the ratings. It's a little gritty. It hasn't really gotten its footing yet. It almost doesn't seem that recognizable. And then season 4 with the NBC arc, with the Jerry pilot, through season 5 and 6, you have like this pinnacle where Seinfeld climbs the ranks. It wins its Emmy. Everyone's talking about it. And then you have 7, 8, and 9. And with that, you have, the departure of Larry David. You have a lot of these, newer, younger writers getting on the show. So from that, do you have like a favorite era of Seinfeld, or more specifically a favorite season?
Yeah, I have a really sort of boring answer to that, I think, but I really do love that whole season 4 meta, they make the sitcom Jerry arc. I remember so much about it. I remember this is another moment for me when I first watched it as a kid going like, oh, I get it. And that's so cool. It's another one of those things. We didn't have as many shows that were about television at the time. We didn't have as many things being super meta like that. And that kind of blew my young mind a little bit. Oh, they're making the show, And the fact that they went so far with it as to cast their fake show and make it was kind of amazing and ostentatious. And they weren't at the top of their game just yet, like in terms of ratings. So it was pretty ballsy, like to be like, you barely started watching our show. Now we're going to make it about like making our show. That was kind of amazing. And I liked all of the inside NBC stuff. Plus we got Susan from that, and I'm a Susan fan. So
well, Jennifer, I want to tell our listeners that I did not tell you to say that about season 4, because that is beyond a doubt my favorite season as well, for the exact same reasons you put out there. Like, I love how meta it gets. I always assumed that Seinfeld was popular before that season. In fact, that season wasn't even its most popular season. Nope. Like, it was later on. And season 4 was so intriguing to me because I felt like I had to play catch up.
Yeah.
The show is acting like it's already a big deal, and like, we're not going to hold your hand. So right. It almost like encouraged me or challenged me to get in on the jokes.
Yeah. And I wonder if it even like endeared us to the rest. I feel like that was around the time I started watching too, because that's when most of America started watching. And it's like, you kind of thought you were already behind, like you said, and that actually made you want it more. And then it made you feel like you got like the backstory on the show, because they used so much of the real, the two guys coming up with the show together. It's going to be a show about nothing. That's by the way, where we got the show about nothing, for better or worse. And I think it maybe even gave us the sense that we had been behind the scenes a little. And then we watched the rest of the show kind of knowing all this stuff. It ends up being incredibly clever in a way that I'm not sure, if they meant it or they just were making it up as they went along. I don't know, but everything about it, the like fake Warren Littlefield character, all of that stuff is just incredible. And one of my favorite stories in my book actually is about this guy named Jeremiah Bosgang, who was an executive at NBC in its early days and helped develop the show. And then he left, and he actually decided he wanted to become a comedy writer and actor. And he ended up coming back to audition for the part of himself, like the NBC network executive, and he did not get it. So my favorite weird moments.
That is just one of dozens of stories I had never heard about in your book. I pore over all the Seinfeld knowledge I can get my hands on, and every time I started a new chapter, I was like, "What? Who is this? Like, why have I never heard of this person before?"
Was a great find, and I have to tell you that the reason I found him is that I looked at a bunch of archival kind of stuff about like from NBC at the time, ratings, memos, and all of this stuff, and I came across this stash of memos that were they write these at the early development stages, like one of the development execs has to like write a little report that's like, he goes and watches the taping and says like, this one's good, this one's weak, this is how the testing went, whatever. And this guy, Jeremiah Bosking, had written all of them. And I honestly saw his name and I was like, that is an amazing name. That sounds like it belongs on Seinfeld. And so I looked him up. And I found him, and I was like, well, if he exists, I'm going to talk to him. He turned out to have all these great stories. And it was mainly because I was like, that's a cool name, and it sounds really Seinfeldian.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. So it makes total sense that season 4 is your favorite season, because that is the most Seinfeldia, I feel, of seasons.
Exactly. Because, you know, Joe Davola's on that season, too. Crazy Joe. Mm-hmm. Is that season too randomly. And Joe Davola is a real person who I happen to know from weirdly writing a story about One Tree Hill,
really?
Which he was a producer on.
Oh, wow. So he is nowhere near as crazy as...
No, he's not crazy at all. He's a very nice man from Brooklyn. He has this great Brooklyn accent. Super nice. And I met him when I did a story for Entertainment Weekly years ago about One Tree Hill. I was on the set. And I remember loving him then, and stayed in touch with like the other producer, the actual creator of One Tree Hill. And when this came up, I was like, and we're going to get Joe Davola up, and here is what's going to happen. And yeah, it's a funny story of how he just happened to actually, it was supposed to be a nice thing that they named a character after him. It was Larry's way of being like, hey, you're my buddy, I'm going to name a character after you. And then the character just ended up being crazy. And so people don't realize that that's a real person and that he's not crazy.
I know it doesn't work out for some people out there, like Jerry's childhood friend Mike Costanza isn't happy with things. Right. I'm sure Joe Davola doesn't mind it, but it's like, did I have to be such a nut job?
Right. So he said he gets much better treatment in restaurants. He started getting much better treatment in restaurants after that because they didn't know what to make of him. They're like, is he crazy? Is he not? I don't know. Is he famous? Well, let's just give him a good table.
Well, just throwing it out there, something that Vinny and I have brought up on the show before. Would you rather have a character on Seinfeld named after you? So Jennifer Armstrong, girl on the show, character on the show, or would you rather play a character for just one scene on Seinfeld?
That's a great would you rather. I think I'd like to have the character
named after you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'd like to have the character named after me. It feels historic. It feels like posterity. And there's a lot of those. There's a lot of secret namings on that show. So
absolutely. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for sitting down and chat on Seincast. Let's do a little housekeeping, though.
Yes.
When can listeners and Seinfeld fans expect to buy your book?
So the book is out on July 5th of this year.
And that seems like a significant date, right? Sounds familiar.
Yes, that is actually it's a random anniversary. So, but it's the anniversary of the first airing ever of that crazy, almost unrecognizable pilot episode. One episode deal. So that one episode just ran like as hidden as possible, right? Who's watching TV on July 5th? On July 5th. So that is why it comes out on July 5th. But you can pre-order it now online on Amazon or any of your online retailers of choice.
I'm a big Seinfeld guy, so I'm like, this better impress me. And my God, did it. Like, I was just blown away by how much I learned from this book. And I think all of our listeners, Seinfeld fans out there, whether you're a hardcore fan or just a casual fan, you're going to get a lot out of this book. So Jennifer, once again, writer of Seinfeldia, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.